I stood at my grandfather's graveside, watching the last shovelful of Montana soil cover the simple pine casket he'd requested. The October wind cut through my jacket, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the way my Uncle Frank kept checking his watch, like he had somewhere more important to be than his own father's funeral. Grandpa Joe had been 87 when he passed, still working his 500-acre ranch right up until the heart attack took him. He'd raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 12, teaching me everything about cattle, land management, and what he called honest work. For 30 years, that ranch had been my home, my life, my future. Frank had different ideas. He'd moved to Denver 20 years ago, trading his boots for business suits and his connection to the land for a corner office. His kids, my cousins Sarah and Mike, had followed suit, becoming lawyers and accountants who looked at the ranch like it was nothing more than a real estate opportunity. As the small crowd dispersed, Frank approached me with that fake sympathetic smile I'd grown to hate. "Tom, we need to talk about the arrangements. Sarah's already contacted a realtor about getting the property approved." I stared at him. "Dad's been in the ground for 10 minutes, Frank. I know this is hard, but we have to be practical. The will reading is tomorrow, and we all know how this is going to go. Dad always favored you, but blood is blood. Sarah and Mike have student loans, and I've got my own financial obligations." His words hit me like a physical blow. 30 years of working alongside Grandpa, of learning every inch of that land, of building something meaningful, and Frank saw it as nothing more than dollar sign. "The lawyer wants to see everyone at 2 o'clock tomorrow," Frank continued. "Bring the house key. We'll need to start going through Dad's things." I watched him walk away, already planning how to divide up a life's work like it was a garage sale. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The next morning, I walked through the ranch house one last time, touching the worn wooden banister Grandpa had carved himself, running my fingers along the kitchen counter where we'd shared countless cups of coffee before dawn. Every corner held memory of the man who'd shaped me. Frank arrived early with Sarah and Mike, all three of them dressed like they were attending a board meeting rather than settling their father's final will. They moved through the house with clipboards and calculators, already cataloging what they considered valuable. "The antique furniture could bring decent money," Sarah said, photographing Grandpa's handmade rocking chair. "And some of these old tools might be worth something to collectors." Mike was examining the family photos on the mantel. "We'll need to clear all this personal stuff out before we show the house. Buyers want to envision their own lives here." I felt sick listening to them reduce Grandpa's life to market value. This wasn't just a house. It was where he'd brought his bride in 1955, where he'd raised his children, where he'd taught me that land wasn't something you owned, but something you stewarded for future generations. Frank found me in Grandpa's study, staring at the old desk where he'd kept his ranch records for decades. "Tom, I know this is emotional, but you have to be realistic. You can't run this place alone, and none of us can afford to keep it in the family. The property taxes alone would bankrupt us. I've been running it with it for 15 years, I said quietly. "That's different. Dad was the owner, the decision maker. You were just helping out." Just helping out. 30 years of my life, dismissed with 4 words. The drive to town felt like a funeral procession. Frank rode with his kids, probably finalizing their plans for my inheritance. I drove alone, thinking about all the conversations Grandpa and I had shared about the future of the ranch, about keeping the land in the family, about building something that would last. I'd never seen the actual will, but Grandpa had always made it clear that the ranch would be mine someday. At least, I thought he had. Chapter 3. The Lawyer's Office. Henderson and Associates occupied a modest building on Main Street, the kind of place where 3 generations of the same family had handled wills, divorces, and property disputes for the entire Mr. Henderson himself was probably 70, with silver hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. Frank, Sarah, and Mike had claimed the chairs closest to Henderson's desk, leaving me to sit across the room like an outsider in my own family. They whispered among themselves while we waited, occasionally glancing in my direction with expressions that ranged from pity to barely concealed irritation. "Thank you all for coming," Henderson began, settling behind his desk with a thick folder. "I know this is a difficult time, but Joe was very specific about how he wanted this handled. Before we begin with the formal read, I should mention that your father left some rather detailed instructions about the process." Frank leaned forward eagerly. "We appreciate Dad's thoroughness, but we're hoping to keep this simple. The family has already discussed the practical aspects of settling the estate." Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, Joe anticipated there might be some assumptions about his intention. He was quite insistent that I read his will exactly as written, without summarizing or paraphrasing anything." Sarah pulled out her phone, probably ready to call the realtor the moment the reading was finished. Mike had his calculator app open, no doubt running numbers on the property value. Frank drummed his fingers impatiently on the arm of his chair. I sat quietly, trying to prepare myself for the inevitable. Even if Grandpa had left me a small portion of the ranch, It wouldn't be enough to buy out Frank and his kids. I'd probably end up with enough money to start over somewhere else, but I'd lose the only home I'd ever really known. Henderson opened the folder and pulled out several documents, including what looked like a handwritten letter. Joe's will is quite comprehensive, but he insisted I begin with a personal message he wrote specifically for this moment. The room fell silent as Henderson unfolded the letter, his expression growing more serious as he scanned the contents. Chapter 4. Grandpa's Voice. Henderson cleared his throat and began reading in his measured, professional tone, but somehow the words carried the unmistakable cadence of Grandpa Joe's voice. If you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and I imagine some of you are pretty eager to get your hands on what I've built over the past 60 years. Frank, I'm especially talking to you and those kids of yours who've been circling this place like buzzards ever since your mother passed. Frank's face flushed red. Dad always did have a flair for the dramatic. Henderson continued without acknowledging the interruption. I know what you're thinking, Frank. You figure the ranch will be split up among the family, sold off to the highest bidder, and you'll all walk away with enough money to pay off your debts and maybe take a nice vacation. You've probably already called a realtor. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, sliding her phone into her purse. But here's the thing about assumptions. They have a way of making an ass out of you and me, and I've never been particularly fond of looking foolish. So before we get to the legal stuff, I want to tell you all a story about family, loyalty, and what it really means to earn something. Mike looked confused. Is this normal? I mean, shouldn't he just read the actual will? Henderson held up a hand. Your grandfather was very specific about the order of this presentation. He wanted his message delivered first. The letter continued. Tom, I know you're sitting there probably feeling like the odd man out, wondering if 30 years of working this land together means anything when it comes to blood relations. Well, son, I'm about to answer that question in a way that might surprise everyone in that room. I felt a spark of hope, but tried not to let it show on my face. Frank and his kids were exchanging worried glances now, sensing that their carefully laid plans might be about to hit a snag. You see, there are some things about this family that I've kept to myself for a long time, secrets that I thought would die with me. But watching how some of you have behaved these past few years, especially since your mother got sick, I've decided it's time for some truth-telling. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Chapter 5. The First Revelation. Henderson's voice remained steady, but I could see even he was surprised by what he was reading. Frank, you've spent the last 20 years telling anyone who'd listen that you're a self-made man, that you built your Denver business empire through hard work and smart investments. What you've never told your children, or anyone else, is where the money for that first big real estate deal actually came from. Frank had gone pale. Dad, what are you doing? The letter continued relentlessly. In 1998, when you were struggling to make your first major property purchase, you came to me asking for a loan, not a gift. You were very clear about that. A loan that you promised to pay back with interest. I gave you $47,000 from the ranch's emergency, money I'd saved over 15 years for drought years and cattle market crashes. Sarah looked at her father with confusion. Dad, you never mentioned borrowing money from Grandpa. It was a private family matter, Frank said weakly. Henderson kept reading. You promised to pay it back within 2 years. That was 25 years ago, Frank. Not only have you never repaid a single dollar, but you've also never even acknowledged the debt. When I brought it up a few years ago, you told me I was getting old and forgetful, that no such loan ever existed. The silence in the room was deafening. Mike was staring at his father like he'd never seen him before. But I'm not forgetful, son. I keep excellent records. In fact, Mr. Henderson has copies of the promissory note you signed, along with documentation of the bank transfer. With 25 years of compound interest at the rate we agreed upon, you currently owe the estate approximately $137,000. Frank stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Dad was old, confused. There's no way, Henderson interrupted calmly. I have the original documents right here, Frank. Your signature, the terms, everything properly notarized. The lawyer pulled out a manila folder and spread several papers across his desk. Even from across the room, I could see Frank's signature on what was clearly a legal promissory. Furthermore, Henderson continued reading, this debt has legal standing and will need to be settled before any inheritance distributions can be made. Frank slumped back into his chair, his face ashen. His children were staring at him with expressions of shock and betrayal. Chapter 6. The Web of Deception. Henderson continued reading, and Grandpa's words cut through the room like a scythe through wheat. But Frank, that's not the only debt you've conveniently forgotten. Sarah, Mike, your father has told you that I never helped him financially after he moved to Denver, that he made his own way in the world. That's another lie. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. What do you mean? In 2003, when your father's business was struggling and he was facing bankruptcy, he came to me again. This time he needed $60,000 to keep his company afloat. Again, he promised it was a loan. Again, he signed paper. Again, he's never paid back a single cent. Mike was frantically taking notes now, probably calculating the growing debt in his head. Then there was 2008, during the financial crisis. Another $43,000. 2012, when he wanted to expand into commercial property. $35,000. 2016, when Sarah needed money for law school and Frank couldn't afford it. $28,000. Each number hit the room like a physical blow. Frank was slumped in his chair, his carefully constructed image of success crumbling with every sentence. In total, Frank, you owe this estate approximately $312,000 in principal, plus accumulated interest. That brings your debt to just over $500,000. Sarah turned to her father, her voice shaking with anger. You told us Grandpa never supported your business. You said he was too stubborn and old-fashioned to understand modern commerce. I was going to pay it back, Frank said weakly. The opportunities just never materialized the way I expected. Henderson wasn't finished reading. But the money isn't even the worst part, Frank. The worst part is how you've talked about me to your children, how you've painted me as a stubborn old man who never understood your ambitions, how you've made them believe that I favored Tom over my own blood. The letter's tone grew sharper. You've spent years poisoning your children against me, telling them that the ranch was just a piece of dirt that I was too sentimental to sell. You've made them believe that I was holding back their inheritance out of spite. I watched Frank's children processing this information, seeing their father and their family history in an entirely new light. The truth is, I would have gladly helped all of you build meaningful lives. But you never wanted help, Frank. You wanted handouts that you could pretend were loans. And you wanted me to pretend along with you. Chapter 7. The Deeper Truth. Henderson turned to a new page, and Grandpa's tone shifted from accusatory to deeply sad. Now, Tom, I need to tell you something that I should have shared years ago. Something about why Frank has always resented you, and why he's been so determined to make sure you don't inherit this ranch. I felt my stomach clench. After 30 years, was I about to learn that I wasn't really family after all? When your parents died in that car accident, Frank fought me on bringing you here. He said it wasn't our responsibility, that you should go to foster care or be adopted by strangers. He was worried that having you around would complicate his own children's inheritance. Frank's face had gone from pale to gray. Sarah and Mike were staring at him with expressions of horror. I told Frank then what I'm telling all of you now. This ranch isn't about blood relations. It's about family, and family is defined by love, loyalty, and shared commitment, not by DNA. The letter continued. Tom, you've been more of a son to me than Frank ever was. You've worked this land, respected it, understood what it means to build something lasting. You've never asked me for money, never treated this place like a bank account, never made me feel like a burden. I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I tried to keep my composure. Frank, your children deserve to know the truth about why you've been so eager to sell this ranch. It's not because you think it's the practical thing to do. It's because you know that as long as this place exists, it's a reminder of everything you walked away from, everything you chose money over. Henderson paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. You left this ranch because you thought there was something better out there. You spent 25 years trying to prove that your way was superior to mine. But every time your fancy business ventures failed, you came running back to the stubborn old man for money. Frank was openly crying now, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The ranch you're so eager to sell has been subsidizing your lifestyle for decades. The land you think is worthless has been the foundation of everything you've built in Denver. Sarah reached over and touched her father's arm, her anger replaced by something that looked like pity. Chapter 8. The Final Judgment. Henderson's voice grew stronger as he read what were clearly Grandpa's concluding thoughts. So, here's how this is going to work. Frank, before any inheritance can be distributed, your debts to the estate must be settled, all of them, with interest. That's not negotiable. It's a legal obligation that Mr. Henderson will enforce. Frank looked up with desperate eyes. Dad, I don't have that kind of money. If I liquidate everything, I might be able to come up with $200,000, maybe $250,000. The letter anticipated this. I know you don't have the money, Frank. Your business is leveraged to the hilt, your house has 2 mortgages, and your retirement account is practically empty. I know this because I've been watching your financial situation for years, hoping you'd finally ask for help instead of just taking it. Henderson pulled out another document. Your grandfather has provided a solution, however. Frank, you have 2 choices. You can either pay the debt in full within 90 days, or you can sign over your inheritance rights to Tom. The room erupted. Sarah jumped to her feet. That's not fair. You can't just… Actually, Henderson interrupted calmly. He can. The will is very specific about this. Frank's inheritance is contingent upon settling his debts to the estate. Mike was frantically scribbling calculations. Dad, even if we sold everything, we couldn't come up with $500,000. Frank looked broken. So what happens to Sarah and Mike? They didn't know about any of this. Henderson smiled for the first time. Your grandfather thought of that too. He returned to the letter. Sarah and Mike, I don't hold you responsible for your father's choices. You've been raised to believe certain things about me, about Tom, and about this ranch. Some of that is Frank's fault, but some of it is mine for not being more open about our family's real history. The letter's tone became warmer. Sarah, I know you're a good lawyer, and Mike, your accounting skills are impressive. If you're willing to learn about ranching, to spend real time here understanding what this place is about, then you'll always have a home here with Tom. I looked at my cousins with surprise. Even after everything, Grandpa was offering them a chance. But, the letter continued, if you choose to see this ranch only as a real estate opportunity, if you can't understand that some things are worth more than their market value, then you'll leave here with nothing but the knowledge of who your father is. Chapter 9. The True Inheritance. Henderson reached for the final document, the actual will. Now we come to the legal distribution of assets, he announced. Frank sat motionless, staring at his hands. Sarah and Mike looked like they were in shock, trying to process everything they'd learned about their father and their family. To my son Frank, Henderson read, who has already received over $300,000 from this estate over the past 25 years, I leave my forgiveness and the hope that he will finally learn the difference between taking and earning. Frank's shoulders shook with silent sobs. To my granddaughter Sarah, I leave my collection of law books and the hope that she will use her legal skills to help people rather than just to make money. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. I don't understand. What about the ranch? Henderson continued. To my grandson Mike, I leave my financial records from 60 years of ranching, a masterclass in honest bookkeeping and long-term thinking. Mike looked confused. But what about our inheritance? What about the land? To Tom, Henderson read, his voice carrying the weight of finality, who has been my true son in every way that matters, I leave the entirety of my ranch, including all land, buildings, livestock, equipment, and mineral rights. The silence that followed was absolute. Frank's children stared at Henderson as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. Furthermore, Henderson continued, I leave Tom the responsibility of deciding whether Frank's children deserve a place in this family's future. They are welcome to work the ranch alongside him, to learn what it means to build something lasting, and to earn their place here through dedication and respect for them. I felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Grandpa had done. He'd given me everything, but he'd also given Sarah and Mike a chance to choose their own path. However, the will continued, if they choose to contest this will or attempt to force a sale of the property, they forfeit any claim to future consideration and will be permanently barred from the ranch. Henderson looked up from the document. There's one final provision. Tom, your grandfather has established a trust fund for the ranch's maintenance and expansion. The money Frank owes the estate, should he ever be able to pay it, will go into this trust to ensure the ranch's future. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The silence in Henderson's office stretched for what felt like hours. Frank sat slumped in his chair, the weight of his exposed lies and debts crushing whatever dignity he'd walked in with. Sarah and Mike kept looking between their father and me, trying to reconcile the family history they'd believed with the truth they'd just learned. Finally, Sarah spoke. Tom, I owe you an apology. We all do. We came here today expecting to divide up Grandpa's estate like it was just another business transaction. Mike nodded slowly. I had no idea Dad had borrowed so much money. He always made it sound like Grandpa was too stubborn to help with anything. Frank finally looked up, his eyes red and hollow. I never meant for it to go this far. The first loan, I really did plan to pay it back. But then the business took off, and I got caught up in the success. I started thinking of the ranch money as an investment in my future. An investment that you never acknowledged, I said quietly. Grandpa didn't care about the money, Frank. He cared that you lied about it, that you made your kids think he was selfish when he was actually funding your entire life. Henderson gathered the documents. Frank, you have 90 days to decide how you want to handle your debt to the estate. Tom, the ranch transfers to you immediately, along with all associated assets. Sarah looked at me with something that might have been hope. Tom, what Grandpa said about us having a place here, did he mean that? I studied my cousins' faces, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. They'd been raised on lies and resentment, but that wasn't entirely their fault. Grandpa was a wise man, I said finally. He knew that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice. If you want to learn about ranching, if you want to understand what this place really means, then yes, there's a place for you. Mike leaned forward. What would that look like? I mean, practically speaking, it would mean starting over, learning the land, the cattle, the seasons. It would mean understanding that this isn't a business to be optimized. It's a way of life to be preserved. Frank stood up slowly, looking older than his 65 years. I need to go home and figure out how to explain this to my wife. How to explain that everything we've built was funded by the father I spent years criticizing. As we prepared to leave, Henderson handed me a sealed envelope. Your grandfather asked me to give you this privately. Chapter 11. Grandpa's Final Gift. That evening, I sat on the porch of the ranch house, my ranch house now, and opened Grandpa's final letter. The sun was setting over the pastures where our cattle grazed, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that no photograph could ever capture. Tom, the letter began in Grandpa's familiar handwriting, if you're reading this, then you've survived what was probably the most uncomfortable afternoon of your life. I'm sorry I couldn't spare you that, but some truths can only be told after I'm gone. I smiled despite my exhaustion. Even in death, Grandpa understood exactly how I'd be. I want you to know that every decision I made about the ranch was based on one simple principle. This land should go to the person who loves it most, who understands its value beyond dollars and cents, and who will protect it for future generations. The letter continued. Frank was my son, and I loved him, but he never understood that some things can't be bought or sold. He saw the ranch as a stepping stone to something better, while you saw it as something worth dedicating your life to. I thought about all the mornings Grandpa and I had shared, checking on the cattle before dawn, fixing fences in the summer heat, planning for the future of the ranch. I know Frank's debt seems harsh, but I wanted him to understand the true cost of his choices. He spent 25 years taking from this ranch while telling himself, and his children, that he was independent. Maybe now he'll finally understand what he walked away from. The letter's tone grew warmer. As for Sarah and Mike, they're good kids who were raised on bad information. Give them a chance to choose their own path. If they want to learn, teach them. If they want to leave, let them go with your blessing. I looked out at the land that was now mine, 500 acres of rolling pasture, timber, and creek bottom that had been in our family for 3 generations. The responsibility felt overwhelming and perfect at the same time. Tom, you've already proven yourself as a rancher and as a man. Now I'm asking you to prove yourself as the head of this family. Be better than I was at keeping us together. Be more honest than Frank was about what matters. Be the kind of man who builds bridges instead of walls. The letter concluded. This ranch is yours now, but remember that you're just its steward for the next generation. Take care of the land, take care of the cattle, and if you're lucky enough to find someone to share it with, take care of them too. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. 3 months later, Sarah showed up at the ranch on a Saturday morning, wearing jeans and work boots instead of her usual business attire. She'd taken a leave of absence from her law firm to spend the summer learning about ranching. I brought coffee, she said, holding up a thermos, and I was hoping you could show me how to check on the cattle. Mike had visited twice, spending long weekends learning about the financial side of ranch management. He was fascinated by Grandpa's record, 60 years of careful documentation that showed how to build something sustainable rather than just profitable. Frank had managed to pay back about half of his debt by selling his Denver office building and downsizing his business. He'd also started attending family dinners again, slowly rebuilding relationships that had been damaged by years of lies and resentment. I know I can't undo what he told me as we sat on the porch, but I want to try to be the father and brother I should have been all. The ranch was thriving under my full ownership. Without the uncertainty about its future, I'd been able to make long-term improvements and expand the. More importantly, I'd started dating Emma, the veterinarian who'd been caring for our cattle for years. She understood the rhythm of ranch life and shared my vision for the future. As I walked through the pastures that morning with Sarah, teaching her to read the signs of healthy cattle and good grass, I thought about Grandpa's final words. He'd been right about the importance of building bridges instead of walls. Tom, Sarah said as we headed back to the house, I want you to know that I'm not here because I think I deserve part of this ranch. I'm here because I want to understand what Grandpa saw in this place, what made it worth more to him than money. I smiled, hearing an echo of Grandpa's wisdom in her words. That's exactly why you're welcome here, Sarah. That's exactly what he hoped you'd figure out. The ranch would continue for another generation, maybe longer. The land would be protected, the cattle would be cared for, and the family, redefined by choice rather than just blood, would grow stronger. Grandpa's final words had done more than distribute his assets. They'd revealed the truth about our family and given us all a chance to choose who we wanted to be going forward. Thank you for listening to this story about family, inheritance, and the true meaning of legacy. I hope it reminded you that the most valuable things in life can't always be measured in dollars and cents, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give our loved ones is the truth, even when it's difficult. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please let me know what part of the world you're listening from, and if this story resonated with your own experience with family dynamics or inheritance issues. Your stories and perspectives from different cultures and backgrounds always enrich our community here. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served and family secrets revealed, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories about real people facing extraordinary circumstances. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, and thank you again for being part of our storytelling family.